We're about to start. Okay. Pete and I are here in the studio. I know it's 8 o'clock and we're about to start our natural science and technology didactics tutorial. It's the third one in our series of 4. And I just want to welcome all those who would be watching from home, who might join us from the CLCs, and who certainly will link up with the URL once our tutorial is over and it will be posted on Funda. Good evening, everybody. I'm Desiree Moodley, and it's my pleasure to lead you through Unit 3, Tutorial number 3 of Natural Science and Technology Didactics. I'm going to use a PowerPoint, a couple of videos, and I will go through what is in store for us this evening. So I do invite you and encourage you to, while you're watching this presentation, to make best of the opportunity, take careful note of the information, and feel free to communicate during the course of the evening and certainly during the course of the week through group chat, through Q&A, and through messages on Funda, as you're welcome to email me. I'm going to bring up our PowerPoint and I will lead you through what our tutorial is going to entail this evening. Okay, so it's Monday the 8th of September and it's tutorial number 3. And tonight we're going to focus on applying science in context. It's Unit 3, Applying Science in Context. So in welcoming you, I'm going to tell you that there are several contexts that we're going to be focusing on tonight. And for the sake of the module, we're going to look at a social context, the context of schools and communities that we serve. We're going to look at the context of the curriculum and its requirements, and we're going to look at the context of science, the context of the different strands that is required, and that's the science context falls under. So what is in store for us in tonight's tutorial? I'm going to begin with a video, a very short clip that's going to take us right into the heart of what we're going to be focusing on tonight, teaching, learning, and assessment. It's a 2-minute long video. I am going to show it, and you are welcome to also type in the link and watch it at your convenience. We're going to look at a brief recap of where we are thus far in our module and its expectations and what we have covered already. We're going to look at a brief recap on assignment 1 that has just been concluded, that looked at planning and doing science. This unit's also going to focus heavily on module outcome 3. So we're going to look at applying science in context. In preparation for assignment 3, which is going to be an essay, and we will focus a bit on that. Then in preparation for that, and in preparation of meeting the expectation of the module outcome, we're going to look at what does the curriculum require us to do, its context with regards to the 4 strands within the CAPS policy for natural science and technology. And another video, a very short one, we're going to watch 5 minutes of this video as an example of best practice. And then we're going to conclude with some questions, discussions, and a recap of our first video as well. So tonight we're looking at science in context and the strands in particular with regards to the curriculum. It's about adapting and changing according to where we find ourselves. And it's about rising to the creative challenges, the creative critical challenges in terms of the capacity for our society in doing science, in meeting and applying science knowledge in context. So I'm going to ask you to either type in this Earl when you see it, and I'm going to show you a short clip now, and I want you to ask yourself, as a student, as a future teacher, or as a teacher in practice already in preparation for this module, what does this video mean for you? What are the thoughts that come to your mind as meaningful in terms of applying science knowledge? I'm going to bring up the video.
In an age of accountability and an increasingly complex and changing world, educators need strategies that help students become lifelong learners and ways for them to show what they know. In the same way that effective educators establish goals for themselves, they must provide learning targets for their students to shoot for. Without such an achievement target, students can become confused or frustrated. Many students can end up left behind.
Okay, we're going to start that again.
Check the sound.
Sure.
In an age of accountability and an increasingly complex and changing world, educators need strategies that help students become lifelong learners and ways for them to show what they know. In the same way that effective educators establish goals for themselves, they must provide learning targets for their students to shoot for. Without such an achievement target, students can become confused or frustrated. Many students can end up left behind, unable to show what they know, unable to succeed.
I hear the rhetoric, leave no child behind. And I say, do we really mean that? Do we really want to do that? Because if we do, we can do it. We can build schools that do that. They're not going to look like the schools that we grew up in, though. They're going to be different. And one place where they're going to be profoundly different is the manner in which we use assessment, evaluation, and grading.
Changing the way assessment is used for student learning can work to maximize student success. Program 1, Assessments as a Critical Part of Learning, will put into clear perspective what it means to use assessment that is not simply of learning, but distinctively for learning. The educator's assessment belief system will be challenged, and the importance of student involvement in assessment will be considered. It will also be explained how classroom achievement targets can be aligned with state testing standards. Program 2 will focus on assessment literacy that enables educators to target the why, what, and how of assessment. With assessments as a critical part of learning, the learning target is in full view of the students. They become prepared and ready to show what they know and are able to do as lifelong learners.
Okay, I'm going to bring up our PowerPoint again. I would like you to watch that video again in context of teaching, learning, and assessment as an integrated process in terms of meeting and applying science knowledge in context. We will come back briefly at the end of this tutorial to this video, and in preparation for a more comprehensive, focused tutorial number 4 that looks particularly at assessment. There are some reasons why I brought this up now, and I will share that with you as we progress. So where are we at thus far? I would like you to engage in a very brief question and answer, a self-reflection on what you have achieved as a student so far for this module. We have already covered outcome 1, which looked at understanding science and technology, what is science, and what the CAPS document requires of the intermediate phase. We looked at its breakdown and its parts. Module outcome 2 focused on doing science and technology, and to this end you submitted a table whereby you demonstrated your knowledge of planning science and technology activities as required in the curriculum. Exploring science, and we looked particularly at planning projects and looking at a project-based approach to teaching natural science and technology. We looked at the science process and the various skills that are required for the teaching and learning of natural science and technology. Just a brief feedback on assignment 1, where you had to plan a project for a specific grade. I would like to commend all those who submitted their assignments on time. At the level of interaction, the amount of work that you put into this assignment, I want to commend you and encourage you to keep up the standard. Do take note, however, that the plan was for a 4-week program, and some of you really outdid yourself. In practice, quite often what we plan does not always pan out accordingly. So do take note that in practice, you would need to be quite flexible, and much of what we plan may not happen in the time frames that we plan it for. So in providing the various strategies, activities, lessons, be aware that a 4-week program may not cover all of that you submitted. Yet you are in the process of developing repertoire, gathering ideas, activities and so forth that you can use in preparation for teaching in the future. So I do want to commend you on that. I also want to say that your tables needed to be more user-friendly, that in the future, if you accessed that information, it must be easy for you to understand and apply. Yet, I do want to commend you at the effort, the presentation, the quality of your work that you submitted for assignment 1. I want to urge you to keep it up and encourage you to keep up that level for assignment 2 that will come up shortly. Okay, so what is module outcome 3 all about that unit 3 is based on? This module prepares you to plan, develop and assess a strand in natural science and technology for the intermediate phase. It's about applying science and technology knowledge in context. So what does that mean? How are we going to go about meeting that outcome? Firstly, you are going to meet the outcome through this assignment, your next assignment, which is going to be an essay. This essay is going to be about 3 to 4 pages and not more than 1,200 words. The essay is going to be a discussion and a description. You're welcome to critique and delve deeply into the topic. However, it is a discussion, so you will look at advantages and disadvantages, pros and cons. You will look at the question critically. It is a description of the strands that make up natural science and technology in the CAPS curriculum. And by strands, we're really talking to the context, the natural science and technology knowledge context. You're going to discuss how to apply these strands in teaching and learning and assessment. You're going to look at discussing strategies and approaches that you could use, and I've asked you to focus more specifically on grade 5, using examples to illustrate creativity, critical thinking, exploration, and experimentation. It's going to be critical for you to choose appropriate headings for your assignment in its presentation, and make sure that your in-text referencing and your bibliographies are in keeping with Cornerstone's requirements. I ask you to read up again the academic guidelines, and it will highlight to you the need not to cut and paste, to reference correctly, to the quality of the assignment, and so forth. I also urge you to read up the fine details of this essay in your module outline, which you will find on Funda. This essay comprises 30% of your year mark for this module, and it is due no later than the 25th of September, which is not too far from now. And I would encourage you to use the knowledge you have gathered thus far in terms of the discussion forum, assignment 1. Use that knowledge in as background and as a foundation to underpin your essay. Do be simple and straightforward. Keep your sentences short and to the point. Keep your paragraphing tight around your main ideas, and present your work according to the academic requirements of an essay. So to prepare us for this outcome and to help you towards doing this essay, we're going to start by looking at about 5 minutes of a 30-odd minute video by a most useful teacher and scientist called Bill Nye. Bill Nye is known as the science guy. He's been around quite a long time, and he has put together a lot of material that can be used across the phases for the science classroom. While you watch this video, I'd like you to just bullet some points that you could use in your essay. For now, just some key ideas that you can make bullet points around, but certainly they can be developed into paragraphs because they provide some nice ideas on science in a social context. So applying science in a social context. I'm going to bring the video up now.
Hurry, he'll be here soon! Richie! I'm not leaving the devices for the child monitor. Have you cleaned your room yet?
I can't, Mom. I'm busy.
Busy? You know he'll be here any minute. Now clean your room.
But, Mom, we're doing an experiment on chaos theory.
Just don't touch that.
It's
Bill Nye the Science Guy. Bill Nye the Science Guy.
Science rules.
Bill Nye the Science Guy.
Inertia is a property of matter. T, 7 seconds.
Brought to you by the Do-It-Yourself Science Kit. Simple experiments you can do at home. New from DIY Side.
Science is wonderful. It's in everything we see, feel, and touch. Science is how we learn about the world. With science, we found out that all of our food comes from plants. And plants make their own food from air, water, and sunlight. By watching clouds drift and ice melt, we discovered that matter exists in only 3 phases. We found out that dinosaurs once roamed the earth by looking closely at rocks. We learned that our sun is a star, just like all the other stars in the sky at night, by watching them rise and set every day. We watched shadows and figured out that our world is a spinning ball. We invented clocks. There are a lot of experiments that you can do at home to learn about huge scientific ideas. You don't need a special lab. Your lab can be anywhere, because science is something we do all the time, everywhere we go.
And then we're going to talk only anything up there. Elizabeth?
Scientific principles hold true everywhere we go. That's right. A good science experiment is repeatable. Try this. Get a big bowl and fill it with ice water. Now, get a 2-liter pop bottle with its cap and fill this with very hot water. Ow, hot. Let the bottle sit for a few moments. Now dump the hot water out and put the cap on fast. I mean right now. Lickety split. Put the bottle in the ice cold bowl. Look, the bottle collapsed. Now why is that? Well, when you dump the water out, it's not filled with air. It's filled with an invisible gas, water vapor. And when you cool it, the water vapor turns to liquid water. Now liquid water takes up hardly any room at all compared with water vapor. So the air in the atmosphere crushes the bottle like a giant fist. Anyway, the atmosphere is big. So the effect is big. Come with me.
Warm air takes up more space, it expands. Cool air takes up less space. Cool air contracts.
The rest of this video demonstrates several examples of how science can manifest itself in context in the home. I would encourage you to watch the rest of the video, as it provides several ideas, and you can also find further programs by Bill Nye via YouTube for ideas that you could use in the classroom. Science in context. The context that we're talking about here is the context of the community, the context of the school. Quite often we shy away from hands-on, practical, innovative, interactive science classes and strategies because of resources and because of context. Yet Bill Nye provides us some ideas on how you can use everyday examples, everyday resources to teach scientific knowledge in context. The rest of my presentation, I would like to now move on to what does the content of the curriculum provide for us in terms of context. So what does the CAPS curriculum tell us in terms of context? So we're going to focus a little bit about content from the curriculum in the context of teaching and learning and assessment around science knowledge, the use of skills and the various strands that the curriculum offers us. On page 14 and 15 of your CAPS document, I would like to bring this up. We're going to focus a little bit about the 4 strands that the CAPS tells us in terms of the context of teaching natural science and technology. Just give me a moment, I'm going to bring this up because I would like to share the actual pages with you. On page 14, we have for grade 4, 5, and 6, the 4 strands: life and living, matter and materials, energy and change, planet Earth and beyond, the 4 contexts that the CAPS requires. And under each of these strands, technology is integrated, and the different areas are also spelled out. So under life and living for grade 4, for example, we look at non-living and living things, plants and animals, and habitats. We look under matter and materials, materials around, and solid materials, and so forth, that you can easily read up on page 14 and 15. For grade 5, which our assignment is going to focus on, the 4 strands or contexts are the same right across the face. And under plants or life and living for grade 5, we've got plants and animals on Earth. We have animal skeletons, the food chain, and life cycles, which is then integrated with skeletons and structures as you would have it experienced through technology. Under the matters and materials strand, we have metals and non-metals and uses of metals, and the whole concept of processing in technology. Further on in energy and change, we've got fuels, electricity, and movement as it's introduced in grade 5 and explored to more detail in grade 6, rocks and fossils and so forth under planet Earth and beyond. This section is the one that you will focus on for your assignment. So these are the contexts that is being required for the CAPS document for natural science and technology knowledge. On page 15, the contexts are spelled down for us in terms of time frames, term 1 to 4, and then there are topics that are broken down across the year, and for grade 5, it's further highlighted across in terms of the visual diagrams and the tabulated format that CAPS presents to us. So I would urge you to study the CAPS document in preparation for assignment 3 and look at the relevant context in terms of the 4 strands. Our PowerPoint presentation is just going to give you a further breakdown, a quick visual that you can access when you look at this presentation. I have showed this to you before, but just as a quick reference, the 4 strands or contexts under which natural science and technology is taught in terms of the curriculum. We're going to watch another video, a very short excerpt from a longer video that looks at one strategy for teaching as an approach. The strategy can be used across all learning, but we're going to use the strategy of questioning in terms of applying science, in terms of the teaching context. So we have a social context that we teach natural science. We have a curriculum demand that requires us to teach under the 4 strands. And yet as teachers, this has to come alive in our plans and in our preparation So in preparation for a teaching context, I would like now for you to watch this video in preparation for understanding how to apply science and technology in terms of questioning as a strategy for science. We're not going to watch the whole video, but I urge you and encourage you to do so in preparation for your assignment. I want to welcome the one viewer that has joined us tonight. Perhaps you can use Q&A and identify yourself. I want to say thank you for joining us, and do make best of the opportunity that's left before you. I'm going to bring up the video now.
We're going to spend some time with us today and talk a little bit about effective questioning in the science classroom. How do we use questioning? Because a good teacher makes you think even when you don't want to. This is from Fisher and Teaching Thinking in 1998, where they mention the idea that teaching involves sometimes getting students to think about things that they wouldn't otherwise want to think about or wouldn't be able to think about without the environment, structure, and the way in which a teacher is presenting particular material. So questioning is one of the most important skills in getting students to do this thing, do those things, and be effective in their thought processes. Questioning is engaging, it's evaluative, it's efficient, and that I can engage students sometimes through a single question. I can use a question in order to figure out exactly where a student's misconceptions are taking place. And they're very efficient and quick, easy ways of getting data back, observations back on student understanding that then I can use to turn my classroom in a certain direction, turn my lesson to face toward those things that I know students need, and to move on past those things that my students already understand. So we're going to use our time today to talk a little bit about common types of instructional questions, types of questions you might see, the need for diversifying the type of questions that we ask, how to write those questions, and then techniques that you can use to make the most of the classroom questions that you have so diligently prepared for your classes. So the ability to think, to be a lifelong seeker and integrator of knowledge is based on the ability to ask and consider important questions. That's what Richetti and Sharon said back in 1999. In other words, if you want to be a lifelong learner, you have to be able to not only seek out information, but you have to be able to take that information and integrate it into your current conceptual frameworks, into your current understanding. Now, the way you do that as a learner is to be able to first be confronted with considerable questions, be able to consider important questions. Maybe the question of what is with a blank underneath it is not always an important question. Sometimes it might be. But not just to be able to consider important questions, but then as a lifelong learner to be able to generate your own questions. That's where the power of lifelong learning comes in. To be able to figure out, what do I not know? What do I not really know about it? How can I ask myself a question and then go seek out that information to fill in that area, gray area, that blind spot in my current conceptual framework of what I'm trying to learn? So as teachers, our art and our science really is in the ability to ask quality questions. And that starts with crafting them. Good teachers don't always just come up with questions on the fly that are magical. That moment, that magic moment that we see in the movies where the teacher in the front of the room comes up with this beautifully elaborate question that just spurs their students on, usually doesn't happen in a real classroom. Usually it takes a large amount of time for teachers to actually develop quality questions. Now, a good question is short, thought-provoking, and ambiguous, clearly stated, has a common vocabulary, it's comprehensive, straightforward, relevant, related to the objectives at hand. The problem is that getting all of these in one question is next to impossible. To get a short question many times, it can't be clearly stated. Sometimes in science you have to have a slightly longer question to get all of the details in place. For it to be straightforward sometimes means that relevance suffers. So every time this is a balancing act on what creates and crafts a good question. But for the most part, what you need to make sure you're covering is that the questions you're looking at are related to your objectives in class. Always, always make sure that the path that you're asking, you're developing your questions under relate to that objective, relate to your goal. So ask yourself things like, is the question directly related to a curriculum objective? Can I point out how this question helps develop the understanding of the student toward a particular student expectation, toward a particular learning goal or performance indicator that I have in my curriculum? Also ask yourself, does the question actually engage learners' mental energy? In other words, is this just something they could look up on Google, or is this question going to be something that's going to have to make them think about the process, think about the concept of which we're talking about in class? And also, does the question generate critical thought? In other words, not only is it going to make them think, but are there opportunities in place that are going to actually be able to create moments where there's cognitive dissonance, there's opportunities for agreement and disagreement among people during a discussion? Does it require the student to actually infer, to look at data, to draw conclusions for themselves based on other things? That's the type of objective questioning that we want to aim for when we're looking at writing the question. And different parts of the lesson are going to require different kinds of questions to effectively enable students to be able to develop the knowledge to proceed to the next step. So, an example of this is this tool is out in the Google link that I'll give you at the end of today's webinar. But it's simply a piece of paper you can fold like a letter fold in 3 places. And on one section lists questions that you wish to ask the class and have in discussion before the lesson. These may be questions that check prior knowledge, that are designed to engage students and hook students into the lesson themselves, to check and see if students understood what was happening the day before in class, and how, especially when those things tie directly to today's learning objective. Then you've got questions that you're asking during the lesson itself. What questions are important for the students to really get out of the lesson? And questions to ask after the lesson. Questions that are designed to not only wrap up the lesson and make sure that every student has an awareness and an understanding at the cognitive level that you're aiming for, but also maybe ones that extend. Not only extend the idea further into their realm of understanding and their connections, of course, between other concepts, but also extend it into things that they may be covering the next day. So you already have the ability to kind of pre-plan a little bit about what are going to be some of the pitfalls in tomorrow's lessons that may trip up students even on their ability to connect today's material into tomorrow's activity.
And with that, as questioning as a technique to approach teaching and learning in the science classroom, higher order experiences can be planned for in conjunction with the context of your lesson, in conjunction with the context of your environment, in conjunction with the context of the curriculum. I encourage you to watch the rest of that video. As we bring our program, our tutorial to a close, I'd like to go back to our PowerPoint and just to the first activity that I asked you to do, where we watched the opening video that asked you to share your thoughts on lifelong learning in science, where we looked at planning, strategies and approaches, assessment, learning as a cycle. I would encourage you to do this brief activity in preparation and as conclusion to this module and in preparation for your assignment that is at hand. Just to discuss the visual before you, in deciding the knowledge for the natural science and technology curriculum, you are looking holistically at how you're going to do this, what you're going to do, and why you want to do this. You look at learning, teaching, and assessment as a whole in planning and preparing for the various contexts in natural science and technology. So with that, I want to say thank you for your participation. Once you do watch this video, be aware of the important notes that are always on Funda. And more particularly, I want to draw your attention to one of the prescribed books, a very useful book by Loxley et al., Teaching Primary Science. And if you haven't got the book, I urge you to make yourself get a copy or even find out from a library. The book is in print, and there is a 2014 version, which is a useful resource for teachers of science for a very long time, and it gives you all that you need to know in terms of the strands, approaches, strategies, and so forth. And I would like to remind you that our next tutorial, which will be on indigenous knowledge and worldview, looking at natural science and technology in society, will take place on the 29th of September. This is also at 8 o'clock, Monday the 29th of September, and we will look at finalizing the module in preparation for the last assignment, which is assignment 3, which is your 4th assessment for the module. So we have already covered assessment 1, your discussion forum. You have submitted your assignment 1, which was the second assessment of the module. You're going to be doing assignment 2 around the essay, and assessment 4 will be the assignment 3 that's coming up later on this month, and it will be due on the 16th of October. So with that, I want to thank you and wish you every success for the rest of the semester and this module, and bid you a good night.